Welcome to the Bowls England Extra End podcast. I'm Honnor and I'm delighted to have Shieh with me tonight. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
How are you? How's life been for you this year?
It's been quite weird, obviously. So a lot of my life plans, so to speak, got disrupted, obviously, because of the coronavirus. But at the same time, I'm trying to kind of see the silver lining in it, in that I actually do have a lot of time, and I'm relatively young at the moment. So I'm trying to make the most out of it.
So just tell everyone a little bit about yourself, because you're obviously a bowler, but there's a lot more of a story to you. So in your own words, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Oh, don't know where to begin. But I guess the most straightforward answer is that I'm a professional musician, and that I play the horn. Something that's slightly unusual is that I specialize in something called historical performance. So I mainly deal with instruments from about 200 to 300 years ago. So if you go to modern orchestras, you'll see horns with valves. What I do is that I play the instruments that. So let's say if I'm playing Mozart's symphony, I would have used the instruments that Mozart would have had at the time, so horns without valves. I'm also doing a PhD at the moment at Royal Academy of Music, and that is also to do with this instrument, but I'm looking at new repertoire for this instrument and how to write for it.
So I suppose the question is very unusual. How on earth did you get into that?
So to begin with, like the horn itself, I actually had no idea what it was when I first started. So I started at age 7, which was quite early on. But basically, in my primary school, there was a school band. I think it's still there actually. But the band uniform is incredible. It is genuinely the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life. And I just wanted to wear it. So I was just like, I don't care what you give me, just give me an instrument. I just want to be in the band. That's it. So they gave me the horn, and now I just kind of stuck with it. Like, I don't think I truly realized that I want to be a musician or that I want to be a performer as such until quite late on. I know some of my friends kind of realized that about age 12 or something like that. I think for me, it was more like halfway through my undergraduate. That's when I realized just like, yeah, music is what I want to do. I can't imagine myself doing anything else. And then, yeah, it just kind of took me from there.
You're obviously quite modest because you've actually been described as an era-defining musician, and your hobby as such has taken you all over the world, and you've made a career out of it. So what was the path? I mean, you started playing, you achieved your goal of wearing the uniform in the band, happy days. What happened then?
So I think it was just something that I kind of kept going. And about the age of 15, I received the Associate in Music Australia diploma, which was quite an incredibly difficult thing to achieve at such a young age, especially for the horn. But it was interesting because afterwards I suffered like severely from performance anxiety that I just couldn't play. I could not play without breaking down, and naturally I stopped practicing. And it wasn't until I think a month before my audition, before my conservatoire audition, that I started practicing again. And at that time, I wanted to enter as a composition student. And one of the first things that when I got to the conservatoire was the head of brass got me to work with a sports psychologist called Don Green, who's worked with the US swimming team and a lot of professional musicians now. And that kind of got me enjoying playing music again.
So what was the advice, or what was the technique to get you back into it and to overcome the anxiety? What did you have to do?
So without trying to, give a free advertisement, basically the technique it's called a centering technique. And that has a lot to do with visualization. So I don't know quite how to explain it well, but it's to do with actually kind of feeling the center of it, and then you kind of visualize what you're going to do. So hypothetically in music, I would kind of hear the first couple of notes in my head just to hear the sound of it, and like kind of the sensation of playing those notes, and then I just take a breath and I just play. But the idea is that it kind of helps me stay in the moment, and that I'm not really kind of looking back, or I'm not really looking too far ahead. So I don't need to actually think too much. That's the idea.
Yeah. So have you do you still get the anxiety now, or would you say that have you put that behind you?
I think it's certainly something that I've put behind me for a very long time, to the point that I've almost been too calm in performances, and it's just kind of like been a little bit flat. Like all the notes are there, like it's all great, but at the same time, it could do with a little bit of spice. So it wasn't until this lockdown that's when I kind of worked through a few things and kind of try to find that excitement or the beauty in it, and kind of really embrace the imperfection in music.
What would you say your career highlights have been so far?
It's difficult to say.
There've been a lot, haven't there? You don't have to be modest. You can say how good you are.
I haven't really given it too much thought, to be honest. There are like certain moments, they're very small things. Like at the moment, there's a live broadcast, or there's a live stream of a concert that um, I played in about a month ago, and I don't think I played particularly well in that concert. But I don't know, there was something about it that just felt really special and really memorable. Um, but I think probably one of the like main highlights was playing in front of Prince Charles and Camilla. That it was quite something, just kind of seeing royalty in front of you, but quite close proximity, and it's like something, especially growing up in Australia, you just don't really think about, like having that chance.
So when you obviously studied in Australia initially, and then you moved to Cardiff, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So what did you do there? You obviously went to study. So what were you doing there, and where were you?
So in Cardiff, I I moved to Cardiff for a specific teacher, and she's the principal horn of English Baroque soloists, along with basically all the top period orchestras around the world. And to be honest with you, I didn't really do any research into it. Like the only bit of research I did was nearest bowls club. I had no idea what the city looks like. Haven't even seen the college, so I could have it could have gone really badly, to be honest with you.
That's quite a big move from Australia to Cardiff as well, especially not really knowing what you were moving to, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, looking back, there were quite a lot of moments in my life where I didn't realize the gravity of the situation at the time. And that was kind of a blessing, because it meant that I kind of went for certain things with a lot of conviction and, in a sense, kind of fearless about it. But looking back, could have been a terrible idea. And that's certainly some of the things that I've done with my music career as well. Just like going into jobs that didn't really know how badly things could have turned out if things didn't go right, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But so far, I've been lucky, so that's all right.
So it was back in Australia that you were introduced to bowls, and your parents started originally. How did they get into it?
Um, I don't know how to tell this without kind of, you know, stitching them up. But so my mum kind of retired about 4 or 5 years ago, and my dad was kind of working part time at the same time, and they both wanted to do something that they could both do.
Mm.
And bear in mind, my mum's really not gifted, like when it comes to the sporting department. So my dad's quite into golf. My mum couldn't quite make contact with the ball. So and we lived quite close to a bowls club, and I think like just like by the bowls club, they just had a sign just like, oh, try bowls day. So my parents both tried. They kind of really enjoyed it. The people are really lovely. And then so they started kind of having coaching sessions and like kind of practicing. And one time I just kind of went down to the club with them. I was meant to be studying for my German exam, which I knew I didn't really need to study for because I did live in Germany a little bit and I could speak it relatively fluently. So I just kind of went along, like, enjoy the sun kind of thing. And I just saw them, having a coaching session, and I was like, I could beat my dad at this. So I joined.
So did you like it straight away?
I don't know whether I actually liked it straight away, but I think I was intrigued by the game. It was, yeah, it was quite a strange feeling, or like, kind of like trying to recount back to whether I liked it or like the sensation of playing bowls. I think at that time, so before I picked up bowls, I was playing hockey, field hockey, at quite a competitive level, and obviously with music, I couldn't really do both, especially after getting a concussion. So I think I was just really eager to kind of transfer my energy and passion for hockey into something else.
Yeah.
And it turned out that bowls, had all the level of excitement. It's a lot more strategic, which is something that I really enjoy. Or as in like strategies that you have more time to comprehend and more time to plan ahead. Whereas like a lot of other sports, you have to kind of react quite quickly at the time.
Yeah.
But bowls can kind of think a little bit. And then I think I just really enjoy being out in the elements, like, against the scorching heat or like hail, like just with with nature. So I just really enjoyed that.
What about the uniform though? Because obviously you went for the band because of the uniform. How did the bowls kit compare?
I have to say in Australia it's a lot more colourful. I actually had to get like whites and greys when I first moved here, and actually like white bowl shoes as well when I first moved to Cardiff. But for me, I don't really mind it. The uniform never really played a factor. That being said, I've always been kind of attracted to the more colourful bowls.
Yeah. So you actually ended up playing against your dad, is that correct?
Yeah. So for those of you who are curious, you can find a really small article online by the Herald Sun, and it was an article on my dad and I playing in the Club Novice final.
And how did it go? Did you win?
Um, yes, I did. And I think the first thing my mom asked my dad was like, "Oh, did you let your son win?" Because I was down 14-20. And then I end up beating him 21-20.
Oh, I bet. How did he live that down?
Not quite sure. I don't know. He was just like, yeah, I just couldn't draw one in, and I'm just like, well, that's your loss then. But it's all right. He won it next year. And my
So
mum won it as well the next year, so they won it together. So that's quite cute.
are they still playing now in Australia?
Yeah, they're still playing, and they're not playing independent season, but they're playing socially. And obviously, with Australia at the moment, like the COVID situation is a lot better controlled, so they've kind of started the season already.
Yeah. Do you have a preference for team games in bowls or singles? What would you say you lent towards?
I think my mind's kind of changed since moving over here. I've always really enjoyed the team element of it, especially playing at the back end, in like fours and so on. Yeah, that's something I really enjoyed, and I could afford to play quite an aggressive game over in Australia. But since moving here, I certainly felt my draw games improved a lot. Maybe I could always draw beforehand, but I think I'm a lot more confident in my drawing ability that I would back myself to draw. And especially this year in outdoors, I've just played a lot of singles, and I kind of really enjoyed that.
Because in your music life, you are both a soloist and you play in an orchestra. Do you have a preference there?
Yeah, very strong preference actually. Um, I I really enjoy playing solo, or to be more precise, chamber music actually, working with a very small number of people, but still having a very individual role to play within an ensemble. Whereas in orchestra, certainly sometimes I do feel that I'm part of a bigger kind of machine that I don't really get a say. in certain like musical directions and so on.
Mm.
And obviously, it's very complicated working in orchestras as well with a lot of colleagues.
Yeah. So you said that you one of the factors of where you were moving to, you looked up the bowls club. So how big a part of your life is bowls?
I think it's actually quite a large part. So I've started going back to playing bowls last week, and I didn't realize how much I missed it. Just, I think certainly for my physical and mental well-being, just being part of that community, being part of something that is so separated from music makes a huge difference in my life. That I suddenly have, people who have no idea what I do to talk about. So I don't need to talk about music with them. And just kind of talking to people from different walks of life, that's something that I really enjoy. And obviously it's a really social game, and it's a bit of exercise in it, occasionally walking up and back.
Yeah, it must help for you as well, being quite so far away from home as you are, to go out and have that social interaction that's separate to your day job.
Yeah, I think so. And certainly with this lockdown, it's the first time I haven't spent Christmas with family or friends. So it was quite daunting at the start, but now that, well, it's back in tier 3 now, so it's not like I can go to Pulse next week. I don't think I can, but certainly having that taste of it, it made me appreciate that side of my life as well, and how important it is for me.
So you're currently in London, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're playing for Paddington.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you were in Wales, you actually got selected for the Welsh Under 25 development squad.
Yeah.
How is
That was
that?
a shock. To be honest, I think it's another one of those things where I had no idea what I was walking myself into. And it was quite eye-opening in the sense that obviously when I spoke, people knew that I wasn't local, but I still very much felt at home and part of the team when I played, and it was quite nerve-wracking at the start because it was something that I've never really experienced beforehand, and it was my first season of indoor bowls. So it was an environment that I was really uncomfortable in, but I mean, it kind of helped that I was like the team was down like 0-16 after 8 ends, and I think by like 0-10 after 5 ends, I was just like, you know what, like this can't get any worse. Like I might as well just enjoy myself out there. It's not like I could get selected the next game or anything like that. And yeah, it was just I just kind of like enjoyed every bowl and just kind of enjoyed the opportunity of being on the green. And I was very fortunate to be selected for the next time as well. But I happened to be working in Germany that next week, so in the end I didn't make the squad. But that's all right. It was a very good experience.
That's really good. Your attitude is quite refreshing, I have to say. What did you think about indoor bowls? Because there's not a lot of that in Australia. So how did that compare?
No, it's certainly not a lot in Australia. I mean, I did play a lot of kind of carpet bowls, so to speak, in Australia, and it was something nice to do. But I think certainly indoor helped me understand my draw game a lot better, but
Yes, more.
also understand the kind of delicacy in the tactics and like the strategies that could be involved as well. Like in Australia, like sometimes I still watch some of the games back in Australia, and obviously with the Bowls 3-5 happening in New Zealand at the moment, and sometimes it just kind of comes across as like a bit of like blunt force trauma with some of the attacking shots, and certainly that doesn't quite work in indoor in UK. So it certainly kind of helped me understand the delicacy of the game.
Can you see now why we would struggle when we go over to Australia and have to sort of click into playing on those greens, and similarly vice versa when you come over here and you're playing in a tournament and you have to adapt to it really quickly? It's very different, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's really different, and obviously, when it comes to bowling ability, like there's no doubt that any of the bowlers in any of the national teams, they can play in any surfaces. But I think the most noticeable thing is actually the mindset. From what I can see from my limited bowling experience, is that there are certain things that you kind of, when you're under the pump a little bit, you kind of go for your comfort zone. And when that comfort zone doesn't really quite work in certain environments, then you can kind of run into certain trouble.
So do you use any of the attributes that you've got or tactics from music and transfer them on the bowl screen, do you think?
Yeah, so certainly the centering technique is something that I really kind of taken on board, and it was really evident in sports first. So in field hockey, I noticed that I've become really consistent as a goalkeeper. That I'll be having really not amazing games. Like occasionally I have really good games, but I stopped having really bad games. And certainly that kind of really helped me. But in terms of bowls, I find the centering technique kind of works extremely well for bowls, because you've got, I mean, to put it very simply, the bowl needs to go from point A to point B, and the weather and the surface might have small kind of interferences with the line, but basically it's a very simple action that you can kind of really visualize and repeat a lot of times, and that's something that I find really easy, transferring that skill into bowls.
Really interesting. You've recently found Disability Bowls England.
Mm-hmm.
What's the link there? Why have you approached them?
So during lockdown, I was very lucky in the sense that I went in for an MRI scan, and the neurologist managed to find a lesion in my brain, which has been causing a lot of complex seizures. And in a sense, it was kind of a relief, because a lot of the times I just knew that I was unwell, and like I couldn't really comprehend what I was seeing. I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing, and occasionally I'll have the odd fit, and I get kind of paralyzed on the right side temporarily. So in a sense, I'm kind of understanding my condition now, and it's kind of really helped me manage it. But at that time, I didn't really know what was happening, and certainly I was really struggling to kind of live independently, and in a sense, to bowl unassisted. And I just kind of wanted to reach out to see if they've got any resources that might be helpful, especially with bowls, just to see if they know anyone that might be going through similar things, or whether I might eventually need to use a wheelchair to kind of play. I thought they wouldn't know, so I kind of reached out to them, and I heard back quite quickly, and it was really nice to be part of that community.
So was this something that you were born with, or is it something that's developed over time?
Yeah, so it's something that I was born with. They suspected that it was caused by focal cortical dysplasia. So I was born with certain kind of neural networks not really kind of linked together, or that there was a benign tumor when I was kind of very early on that obviously left a scar there. Yeah, but I don't think I realized what it was until recently, I think since 2018, the condition just kind of got worse and worse over time.
So did that affect that obviously must have affected your music. Did you have to stop?
Yes and no. I kept a lot of professional work going on. Obviously, with college, they made a decision for me that it would be better off for me if I rest up as much as possible. So I wasn't really involved with a lot of college activities at the time. But I think I'm one of those people who are just kind of a little bit stubborn, and again, walk into situations that I didn't know, but that could have gone really badly. So I remember the first time I had a TOTS paralysis. So that's when I couldn't move my right side for about a day. And at that point, I thought like that was it. Like that was my playing career done. But then obviously the next morning, like I could kind of move again. It was quite weak, but I could move it. So I kind of just went and did a really kind of relatively high profile concert in Wales, like I think 3 days later. And it's one of those repertoire where you kind of sit there, you don't do anything for about 45 minutes, and then you just play for 4 minutes, and that 4 minutes happens to be probably, it's not technically hard, but psychologically it's extremely difficult. And there have been so many professional players who have kind of, messed up in the past, and that it kind of got a little bit of legacy going on that, this is the piece that you can screw up kind of thing. So, and that went well, but looking back, like it was rather brave, to put it nicely, of me to actually do that.
So what, like going forward, are you on medication and things now?
Yeah, so I'm on quite an aggressive medication at the moment, and that's really helped. Obviously, I had to make certain lifestyle changes, so I don't drink alcohol, I don't drive. I know that I can't be exposed to strobe lights and certain things like that. And I can't drink coffee, can't drink anything caffeinated, and can't eat chocolate. So a lot of things I can't do, but at the same time, try to make the most of what I can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think that you might want to pursue becoming a director for Disability Bowls England? Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So actually, I need to send an email to them. But certainly, being a VI director is something that I do want to do. I've had some experiences skipping visually impaired bowlers in the past, and I feel certainly I've got quite a good spatial awareness and things like that. So I feel like that kind of skill set might be beneficial for VI bowlers. And if I can give something back to DBE, then I certainly would want to.
Is there a classification that you can play in, Isaac, or not?
No. So with my condition, it's neurological, and it's not permanent. So I think anything related to epilepsy, you can't get classified. Whereas if it's cerebral palsy, you can. So I won't be able to be classified unless, maybe I chop off my arm or something like that, which I don't plan on doing.
Maybe not. But
Yeah.
your aim is to continue with bowling generally.
Yeah, certainly. At whatever level it might be, I think it's certainly something that I enjoy and is important in my life, and I'm just very glad that I found the sport.
So where do you prefer to play bowls, over here or in Australia?
Over in Australia.
Totally different. Explain to people why it's so different for those that might not know.
I think certainly the grass is quite different. I'm not sure what the actual grass is in UK, but in Australia they use tiff dwarf or bent a lot. And something I've noticed quite significantly is that when you kind of in Australia, if you kind of pitch it out quite wide, the balls will always come back. So it's a little bit like indoor in here, whereas in UK, once you kind of pitch it out of the line, it will kind of struggle to come back. That's something I've noticed. Certainly with kind of upshots and stuff like that, I think in Australia it does hold a lot better. And obviously to be fair, I've played on some pretty fast greens actually this summer, but in Australia the greens are certainly a lot quicker, in my opinion.
What bowls are you using over here?
I'm using Aero Grooves.
Did you play with Aero in Australia as well?
Yeah, so I used Aero Optima back in Australia, and then I just thought I know what Aero bowls can offer, and I know what I can do with them. So I just thought, I might as well stick to them. And so far, it gets me from point A to point B quite well. So that'll do.
So will you stay in London? How long are you here for, or is this a permanent move? Do you know what you're doing?
Well, certainly with the PhD, that will kind of get me another 3-4 years. It's something that I do want to move here permanently. It depends a lot on visas and things like that. Obviously, it's not up to me completely, but I'm quite optimistic, and I do love living in London.
What would you say to somebody that was, thinking about going into a bowls club, hadn't ventured into one before? What would your words of wisdom be?
I think just be open-minded. I think that's certainly an important factor. Just be open-minded, not just about the game, but also about the people as well. Because obviously, as a young person going to a bowls club, it's unlikely that you'll be surrounded by other young people unless you bring all your friends along. But at the same time, a lot of the older members, they've got a lot to offer. And certainly they've got incredible life stories to kind of hear about. And I certainly have learned a lot from a lot of the other bowls members, both in Australia and in here.
I think it's one of those sports where you can be sort of quite close, have quite close friendships with people that are a lot older than you or a lot younger, which is definitely a selling point of the game.
Yeah, and I think bowls is certainly a sport that doesn't discriminate in the sense that you don't really get any real advantage for being a certain gender, certain race, or being able-bodied or not. In that, anyone against anyone on a particular day, even from a beginner against like an experienced bowler, anything can happen. It's a game that kind of makes for quite an even level playing field.
And how did you find Paddington? Did you approach them? I mean, did you find them quite welcoming?
Yeah, they're very welcoming. And I think it was another one of those just like nearest bowls club that will do kind of thing. But it is an incredibly friendly club. It's not the biggest club by any stretch of margin in London. And I'm quite aware that Middlesex is not a particularly big bowling county either. But certainly the people in it are really generous and really friendly. And the team's kind of, there are a lot of new bowlers coming in, and the team's really improving. So I'm quite excited by the prospect of next season, actually.
That's great. You can't ask for much more than that. You've been an absolute pleasure to speak to. Thank you very, very much for talking to me.
Thanks so much for having me.